This is a painting. It's in the theatre and dance collection of the de Young. It's titled "The Opening of the Ballet Parade in Paris," and it was painted by Georges Michel, the artistic counselor of the Ballet Russe, and it depicts, actually, let me start at the beginning. Every now and then in history, we find moments where the right people are all in the right place at the right time, and magic happens. And the 19 teens in Paris were one such moment. Allow me to introduce some of the folks in this painting. So first we have Sergei Diaghilev, Russian impresario and art critic. He moved to Paris after the 1906 Exposition Universelle to present Russian music to the world. He got in a fight with the Russian Imperial Treasury. They cut off his funding. So he looked for and he found new patronage for a project that became what we know as the Ballet Russe. At this point, when the painting happened, the Ballet Russe is in its 9th season, not quite as many as Odd Salon. And but they have produced hits such as Firebird, The Rite of Spring, Swan Lake. You've heard of these. The new they'll cut me off. I can't take that long. The new patron, Maria Zofia Olga Zenaida Godebska-Sert, for short Misha. Also Russian, born to a musical family. Liszt was a family friend. She took piano lessons from Fauré. She hosted salons with guests like Proust, Renoir, Debussy. Her parties were famous for her Pousse Café layered cocktails. She would accompany Caruso on the piano. I need to stop myself before this becomes a talk about her. She was best friends with Coco Chanel. All right. Her third husband, who was a... Misha Sert alone is name dropping. Her third husband was heir to a fortune, and she used that fortune to fund things such as the Ballet Russe. She's bankrolling this whole thing. Pablo Picasso, we've already met tonight. At this point, he's 36 years old. He's been in Paris for 16 years. He's worked through his blue period and his red period and his African-inspired period. And he's discovered synthetic cubism, and in particular, he's working out ways to use collage as a way to make fine art. Jean Cocteau, playwright, author, filmmaker, essayist, but most of all, and he considered all these other things also poetry, a poet. At this point in time, he's 28 years old. At the beginning of his career, Diaghilev's really giving him his first break with the ballet. And in costume on stage is Leonid Massin, recently promoted to the post of principal dancer and choreographer at the age of 21. And then we have Erik Alfred Leslie Satie, gymnopedist, phonometrographer, philophonor. Really, he called himself anything but a composer, even though all the music I'm playing tonight is by Satie. He had really strong imposter syndrome, like you think you and I. In the painting, he's the oldest of the collaborators. He's 51 years old, and he's finally getting some actual recognition and success after quite the life. At the age of 16, he was expelled from the Paris Conservatoire for unsatisfactory performance. His teachers called him the laziest student in the Conservatoire. He re-enrolled a few years later, but hated it so much that to get out, he enlisted in the army. He hated that even more, so to get out of that, he stood outside bare-chested on a cold winter's night until he got bronchitis. It took him 3 months to get well, and after that he was invalided out and finally free. At 21, he moved to Montmartre and started first hanging out really a lot at, and then working as a pianist for the cabaret Le Chat Noir. Here he met Josephine Péladan, who was reviving the occult and Rosicrucianism in France at the time. Satie attended Péladan's salons, wore priest's robes, was appointed official composer of Péladan's Order of the Catholic Rosicrucian Church of the Temple and the Grail. At some point they had a falling out, so Satie founded his own church, the Metropolitan Church of Jesus the Conductor, of which Satie was the only member, also the parsoner, and the master of the chapel. He designated his tiny Montmartre apartment his abbatial residence and began issuing edicts and excommunications. So, uniforms, fake titles, and proclamations, that sounds kind of familiar. So, you won't be surprised to hear me say he was also really fond of hanging out with stray dogs. Here's some of his autobiography. I only eat white foodstuffs. Eggs, sugar, scraped bones, veal, salt, coconuts. I breathe carefully, a little at a time. I very rarely dance. My sleep is deep, but I keep one eye open. Once every hour, a servant comes and takes my temperature and gives me a new one. My doctor has always told me to smoke. Part of his advice runs, if you don't, someone else will. The priest business lasted a few years until Satie inherited some money and spent it on 7 identical velvet corduroy suits, which he was to wear exclusively for the next decade, becoming known as the Velvet Gentleman. He moved to the suburbs of Paris and allowed no one to visit him, though his door was always open to the neighborhood's stray dogs. He was still working as a cabaret pianist, commuting the 6 miles into Paris on foot. At the age of 39, Satie decided to give school another go and enrolled in the Schola Cantorum, Paris's other main music school. And this time he stuck with it and actually graduated with a degree in 1912, majoring in counterpoint. But the school didn't take away his sense of humor and the absurd or his love of animals, so here's the first of his flabby preludes for a dog, titled Voices Within. I should add the tempo marking for that is seriously, but without tears. Anyway, let's steer this back towards the ballet. All his life, Satie would send his work to his friends for feedback, and when Debussy suggested to Satie his music could use more structure, more form, Satie's response was to dedicate to Debussy 3 morceaux en forme de poire, 3 pieces in the shape of a pear, which is a bit of a clapback, is more so when you realize in French, pear is also slang term for idiot, because when you draw an idiot as a cartoon, it's a pear. In 1915, Jean Cocteau heard the 3 morceaux performed in concert and was inspired to write a ballet to Satie's music. He pitched the idea to Diaghilev, and thus was born That's the opening, the curtain score of Satie's score to the ballet Parade. Cocteau and Diaghilev had been kicking around the idea of a circus-themed ballet for a while, but when Cocteau found the right composer, it was clearly the time for this to happen. Cocteau introduced Diaghilev to Picasso, and now they had a set and a costume designer, so we're off to the races. Of course, the project still had to be funded, and Misha Cert wasn't terribly convinced. Cocteau had been doing all the pitching to Diaghilev, Satie, Picasso. Clearly his charms were needed, but it's 1916, he's driving an ambulance in the war front in Belgium. Not to worry, it's not actually such a long commute. And Cocteau would travel back and forth between the front and the theatre right up until before the premiere. So here's the plot. Two circus managers outside their tent present their performers in a sample routine, a parade if you will, to drum up business. The public is unimpressed, the managers wilt, their artists pine, and the horse collapses from exhaustion. Write what you know, right? Picasso did the sets and the costumes and the makeup, and because Picasso never threw anything away, we can see all the ideas and drafts and how things came together, starting from the very first notes and sketches. Not even kidding. Picasso's work for Parade is a masterpiece of cubist collage. And the cherry on top was the overture curtain that greeted theatergoers as they found their seats. So this is what you'd see as you were hearing the music that I just played. To give you an idea of how big this is, here's Picasso's crew taking a break from painting it. And here it is being put on display in the Centre Pompidou in Paris. It's huge. It is, in fact, Picasso's largest work of art. Apollinaire wrote that this new alliance of all the arts had given rise, in Parade, to a kind of surrealism, thus coining a new word and a whole genre of art. You want to see some of it? Fingers crossed this works. Go. No. No. All right. I'm just going to narrate. Go back. I'll go back to a couple of. So this is like 2 people high. The guy can really only move from the knees down. So the 2 managers have a little tap dance battle from the knees down. The little American girl looks very much like Mary Pickford in a little sailor's dress, comes out and does lots of classical ballet moves. And then, to absolute silence, a pantomime horse appears and just canters around the stage. Apparently the pantomime horse had a papier-mâché rider, but it fell off during the dress rehearsal and they just went with it. Just go. This is from a reconstruction of 2008, because obviously there wasn't video taken in 1917. After the publicity success of The Rite of Spring, the Ballet Russe understood how to turn scandal into money, so they wanted another scandal. And probably they got it. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, as you can imagine. Cocteau wrote, "I have heard the cries of a bayonet charge in Flanders, but it was nothing compared to what happened that night." Satie wrote a series of infuriated postcards to a critic who panned the opening, poetry like, "Sir and dear friend, you are an arse without music. Signed, Erik Satie." Which got him sued for defamation and sentenced to 8 days in jail. For all that scandal, apparently the ballet only turned a modest profit, but at least the ragtime number was published for solo piano and became a hit. So, Satie's 3 pieces in the form of a pair are actually 7 pieces, so I'm going to allow myself a 4th here, but only a short one. There's no time to get into furniture music, Satie's influence on Poulenc, Les Six, Dada, John Cage, how Satie invented the prepared piano and helped Man Ray with his first ready-made, all the articles he wrote for Vanity Fair, his charitable work with children. What a life. After Satie's death, his friends finally visited his apartment in Arquet to tidy up. That one. In this tiny studio, they found hundreds of umbrellas and 2 pianos stacked on top of each other, the top one being used as a filing cabinet, and piles upon piles of unpublished writing and music. What a legacy, and take that, imposter syndrome. But back to this painting to round things out. Parade opened in 1917 and was conceived and built while Europe was fighting the battles of Verdun and the Somme. Misha Sert later wrote, "I reread the date 3 times before I could make myself believe that it really was at that time, at the peak of battle, that we kept minds so free as to be able to carry on with artistic undertakings important enough to mark a place in history." So, to finish, let me give you a little bit of that ragtime from Parade and a toast in our time of pandemic and wars. To all of us striving to keep our minds free for artistic undertakings, and to leaving an odd salon-shaped mark in history.